I am Johan Sara. I was born in the Arctic. I have lived through the different seasons and I have become aware of the sounds of nature. Each season has its own shade of sound. Every animal has a different tune and every bird has a distinct sound. These plains and mountains have been here for thousands of years. But the Arctic climate is changing, and the change affects everyone. Everything goes so fast. We have moved so far from the natural that it affects our health, both personally and in relation to how we treat our nature.
Dear ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome to Norway and to the Oslo Tropical Forest Forum. Despite the World Cup, you have chosen to come here to Oslo. We are committed to find solutions to this pressing issue. How to stop and reverse tropical deforestation. If we stop and reverse tropical deforestation, if we also reduce emissions from agriculture, land use, this can contribute 1/3 of the climate solution. Forest and sustainable development are two sides of the same coin. We need more food, fuel, and fodder for a growing population. And we need to halt and reverse tropical deforestation. If we do not, we undermine the ecological foundations of food production. And this prevents us from reaching any of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But to succeed, we must all change. Forest countries must plan more carefully how they use their lands. They must protect valuable forests and indigenous land, and increase food and commodity production elsewhere. Fiscal incentives, subsidies combined should support the transition. And lastly, governments must monitor deforestation in real time and enforce their laws. All of this would benefit the forest countries and their populations directly. Countries like Norway must provide political support and financial incentives. Global agricultural companies must use their market power to stop deforestation from their supply chains. And we must all fight illegal trade in timber, a multi-billion-dollar business larger than all development aid. And we must protect those who are defending the forest and communities. They are indigenous peoples' leaders, protected area rangers, and civil society activists. They are increasingly being attacked and even murdered. Tropical forest countries are leading the way. Brazil's reductions in deforestation in the Amazon are among the largest climate efforts globally in this period. And recently I visited Colombian Amazons with President Santos. Colombia has increased protection of most of the Amazon forests and decided to stop agriculture in the forests. They have granted new autonomy to indigenous communities. And now the armed forces are deployed to protect the forest, establish state presence, and building a lasting peace. This takes place in midst of a challenging peace process. In Indonesia, President Joko Widodo is implementing an ambitious reform agenda. The goal is to protect and restore carbon-rich peatland. Ministers around the world are moving forward, and many of them are present in Oslo today. This gives much reason for hope. New technologies are also creating new opportunities. Satellites can now reveal even small changes in tree cover in near real time. It used to be easy for those cutting down forests illegally to hide in the rainforest. No more. The tools are there. We all just have to use them to stop the offenders. So we know what it takes. We just need to put all our political will and all our courage and all of our creativity into it. That is why the work you will be doing these 2 days at the Oslo Tropical Forest Forum is so important. I wish you the best of luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage the Norwegian Minister for Climate and Environment, Ola Elvestuen.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I first of all wish to thank Francis Seymour for leading our conference program committee and for your relentless work for preserving tropical forests for decades. So thank you. Then, Excellencies, Minister, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, 2 months ago, as also the Prime Minister said, I had the pleasure of going to Colombia with Prime Minister Solberg to beautiful Leticia, where Colombia borders with both Peru and Brazil, right across the Amazon River. There, in the Munia Amena indigenous community, President Santos made 3 groundbreaking announcements. First, he gave autonomy to indigenous communities covering half the Amazon in Colombia. Second, he increased protection for 8 million hectares over the Amazon. Third, freezing of the agricultural frontier, stopping agricultural expansion into forests. Colombia has shown impressive political will to tackle deforestation. Yet, in 2017, deforestation went up by another 22% nationally. In the Amazon, it doubled. We knew this was happening, but still decided to extend our results-based REDD+ partnership until 2025. Only through a predictable long-term partnership can the international community support Colombia's transition, sustainable land use, and a lasting peace. The Colombia example reflects in many ways the global situation. We see political will, but also continued forest destruction. Today, I'd like to reflect on where we are and where we need to go, 10 years after REDD+ was launched in Bali. And I'll take bad news first. Despite significant progress, we are not on track. Instead of forests slowing climate change, forest destruction is still driving climate change. Data from Global Forest Watch show a loss of tree cover equivalent to the area of France, Germany, and the UK combined in the last decade. This is a crisis of existential proportions. We either deal with it or leave future generations a planet in ecological collapse. The good news are twofold. First, the case for action is stronger than ever. No one questions the benefits of halting and reversing deforestation for sustainable development, nor the disastrous consequences of inaction. There is simply no way we can preserve biodiversity, the climate system, or freshwater supplies without stopping forest loss. In fact, we need a planet much greener than today. And the longer we wait, the less attractive our options will be. The Food, Oceans and Land Use Coalition, chaired by Unilever CEO Paul Polman, shows that we can produce the food, feed and fuel the world needs while staying within our planetary boundaries. But to do so, we must use our land in a much smarter way than we do today. We must fundamentally transform the world's food system over the next decade. The deforestation-free supply chain movement must succeed and go global. And we must encourage a shift in global diets. Cutting down forests might make sense in the short term for individuals or for companies or criminal networks, but it rarely benefits the broader society. Some deforestation, and most of the deforestation in Africa, is driven by poverty and the basic local needs for energy and food. This can only be met with broad development strategies. But all too often, it is not the choices of farmers and local communities that drive deforestation. It is the choices of well-connected special interests at the expense of local communities. Some people say we must choose between forests and development. This is a false trade-off. It's like saying we must choose between hunger now and famine later. Brazil's agricultural miracle could be repeated three times over without clearing forests. Indonesia has millions of hectares of degraded lands and aims to shift production to those areas. The Ethiopian government sees forest cover and agricultural growth as two sides of the same coin. There is enough land for both production and protection. And this brings me to the second piece of good news. We know what it will take. Stopping deforestation primarily comes down to public policies. It's about regulations, enforcement, and incentives. First, regulations. Large tracts of the Amazon is still a no man's land on the map. Areas with no formal status, neither protected nor set aside for production. It belongs to no one. A large part of the climate solution lies in simply providing protected status or clear tenure rights to forests with no formal land use category. Peru has set an ambitious goal to reduce by half the area of uncategorized forests. Parts of Indonesia has the opposite problem of multiple overlapping concessions. Two companies having been given right to develop the same land, usually with local communities claiming the land too. Sorting through these issues is about putting the country ahead of special interests. And second, enforcement. Brazil's dramatic cuts in deforestation in the Amazon was in large part due to enforcement. Indonesia has stepped up enforcement of its peat and logging moratorium and initiated legal review of existing licenses. Colombia's armed forces are being deployed to protect the forest and build the peace. I'm glad that General Parra has come here to tell you about it. Early warning systems backed by new technology improves enforcement efforts like those established in Peru last week. The third bucket of reforms is about the money. Too often, domestic public finance promotes rather than discourages deforestation. Few agricultural subsidies were set up with the intent to cause deforestation, but too often they do so as a side effect. Subsidy schemes can be modified to grow rural economies without driving deforestation. The G7 agreed to phase out harmful fossil fuel subsidies and change national policies. We now need a global push to minimize deforestation from agricultural subsidy schemes. Of course, it's not all about government policy. The New York Declaration on Forests was a breakthrough, bringing companies, NGOs, indigenous groups, and governments together around one vision. Large companies are taking serious action to eliminate deforestation. But ending deforestation from soy, palm oil, beef, and paper by 2020 will be extremely challenging. Leading companies now say we cannot achieve it until policies are in place to eliminate all deforestation. They also worry that competitors from emerging markets without zero deforestation commitments will continue to buy from producers that deforest. To this, I have one response: no more excuses. Fixing everything at once simply isn't realistic. We don't need new targets or timelines. Transparency and accountability is what we need, and it is possible. Companies should work with their suppliers, kick out the systematic deforesters, and disclose who they buy from. Forest countries must help contribute to this transparency. Releasing concession maps and ownership data is a very simple measure of political will. Donors should support new transparency tools. Global Forest Watch sees these forests are being lost. The Trace platform is tracing which companies are buying from whom and which companies are exposed to deforestation risks. Now tools disclose the ownership structures and financiers behind deforestation. NGOs will use all this information to go after systematic deforesters. That's their job. But NGOs should also start differentiating and reward transparency. Attack those that don't share their data and deforest systematically, rather than those that are open about their problems and strategies. Access to objective and standardized data will finally allow the finance sector to engage. Banks, investors, and asset managers can go much further in managing material risks from deforestation. through investor engagement, through divestments from the worst offenders, and by progressively shifting investments to companies that manage risks well. Now that I have told everyone else what to do, I should probably say what we will do. Germany, Norway, and the UK pledged $12 billion for REDD+ between 2015 and 2020. And we are delivering on that pledge. That's far from enough. 10 years ago, REDD+ was thought to mobilize tens of billions through carbon markets. That didn't happen. The original idea of REDD+ had flaws. It implied a trade-off between protection and development, where REDD+ would compensate for foregone income. This downplayed the local and national benefits of action and vastly overstated the costs. You don't reduce global deforestation by compensating for the most profitable alternative use of land, hectare by hectare, year by year, for eternity. Some local forest carbon projects still operate by this flawed logic. What REDD+ can do is to support a national transition to efficient and fair land use by paying countries and states for reduced emissions. No silver bullet, but a fundamental part of the solution. Norway's strategy has evolved since 2008. We gradually broadened our strategy as circumstances changed. We will continue to reward ambitious forest countries showing political will and results. Paying for reduced emissions remains a core part of our strategy. International payments provide a political incentive as well as a financial one. A few $100 million will never convince tropical forest countries to do something against their will. It is remarkable how often commentators seem to believe that. $1 billion is a lot of money, but not relative to the profits from soy and beef. We only paid for a small share of Brazil's results, but we recognize them and their commitment to act. Since 2008, we have transferred more than $1.1 billion to the Amazon Fund, a fund solely designed by Brazil. Our payments have supported 96 indigenous territories on an area larger than Germany, helped protect 100 national parks, strengthened Brazil's environmental police, and registered private properties on an area the size of France. And we will continue to partner with countries with strong ambitions and a willingness to commit and help them go further. Today, after this session, Germany and Norway will sign a results-based REDD+ partnership with Ecuador. We will also invest heavily in global goods and support countries and companies alike. We will make frequent high-resolution satellite imagery publicly available for free, because transparency leads to accountability, and accountability leads sooner or later to change. We used to see monitoring as a transaction cost. Now we see it as a core strategy. We will help build the information platform to show in real time who owns the land, who is deforesting, who is buying from them, who lends to them, and who invests in them. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. In just a few years, we will achieve radical transparency in the global forest sector. We will ramp up our support against international forest crimes. Today, we establish a new global initiative with Interpol, RIPTO, and the UN Office on Drugs and Crimes to support national law enforcement efforts. It will target illegalities throughout the forest and agricultural value chains. From corruption and fraudulent licenses to illegal land clearing, forced labor, and tax evasion. It will track illegal timber shipments, follow the money, and prosecute the big fish. We will continue to work with tropical forest governments to support indigenous peoples. We will support indigenous peoples groups directly. The 10-year facility was launched last year, and it is picking up steam. There is clear evidence that indigenous lands have less deforestation, and we will strengthen further our support to the global civil society, to champion climate ambition, to protect environmental defenders, to promote deforestation-free supply chains, and to uncover illegalities. And we will continue to broaden the global social movement to end deforestation. Last year, we launched the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which is already gathering steam. This year, we will mobilize the world's cities to take responsibility for forests. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years ago, countries and companies debated whether to act. Now they debate how to act. Most agree that deforestation is unnecessary and that most actions to stop it are good for development. Change comes gradually until it comes suddenly. We have the power to make it happen. We must be determined, we must be brave, and we must be patient. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage the Minister of Environment Brazil, Edson Duarte.
Bom dia a todos. Quero cumprimentar inicialmente nosso ministro Elvestuen, ministro do Clima e do Meio Ambiente da Noruega. Quero, desta forma, cumprimentar demais colegas ministros, diplomatas, embaixadores, especialistas, acadêmicos, povos indígenas e representante de organizações não governamentais. Dessa forma, gostaria que todos se sentissem cumprimentados por mim. É uma honra e uma satisfação estar aqui participando desse evento, em momento tão importante para a vida no planeta, para a vida de todos nós. Senhoras e senhores, as florestas e os ecossistemas naturais constituem como importantes estoques de carbono que contribuem para a estabilidade do clima global. As florestas tropicais ainda abrigam cerca de 50% da biodiversidade terrestre, desempenham um papel fundamental para regular a oferta de recursos hídricos e para a conservação dos solos. O Brasil é um país de dimensões continentais. Possui 20% das espécies da biodiversidade conhecidas no planeta. Guarda mais de 50% do seu território, do seu gigantesco território, com áreas com florestas. E hoje possui um conjunto de áreas protegidas, que se aproxima 30% do seu território, ou seja, 2,5 milhões de quilômetros quadrados. No Brasil, acreditamos que proteger as florestas e seus serviços ecossistêmicos não seja uma barreira para o crescimento econômico e a melhoria da qualidade de vida. Temos evidências no Brasil que é possível fazer um novo modelo de desenvolvimento que proteja as nossas florestas. Quando comparamos o período 2004 a 2017, o PIB do Brasil aumentou mais de 30%, ao passo em que o desmatamento da Amazônia, a nossa maior floresta tropical no nosso território, reduziu em 75%, quebrando o vínculo entre crescimento econômico e aumento das emissões e, ao mesmo tempo, em que se retificou milhões de pessoas da pobreza. Com a redução do desmatamento, o perfil de emissões do Brasil foi alterado drasticamente. Atualmente, o setor de florestas e mudança do uso da terra não é mais o setor com maiores emissões nacionais. Atualmente, os níveis de emissões anuais são da ordem de 1,5 bilhões de toneladas menores que aquelas registradas no ano de 2005. Essa redução de emissões demonstra que o Brasil está cumprindo de maneira antecipada o seu compromisso voluntário para o ano de 2020. Para alcançarmos a meta nacional, o setor de florestas será fundamental. O nosso objetivo é reduzir a zero o desmatamento ilegal na Amazônia até o ano de 2030. Esse foi o compromisso internacionalmente assumido pelo país. Mas a nossa tolerância tem sido zero para o crime ambiental, zero para o desmatamento ilegal em qualquer um dos nossos biomas. Aumentamos o estímulo ao reflorestamento e temos como objetivo restaurar e reflorestar 12 milhões de hectares de florestas e ampliar a escala de sistema de manejo sustentável. Além disso, fortalecemos os sistemas nacionais de controle e rastreamento dos produtos florestais com o objetivo de apoiar cadeias produtivas que gerem alternativas econômicas para as populações tradicionais, produtores rurais e comunidades indígenas, os verdadeiros guardiões das florestas tropicais. Nesse sentido, o Brasil tem fortalecido a criação de novas unidades de conservação, assim como instrumentos de gestão territorial, para ampliar os mecanismos de comando e controle de proteção das nossas florestas. Nos últimos 2 anos, o governo do Brasil, por meio da liderança do Ministério do Meio Ambiente, criou mais de 92 milhões de hectares de novas unidades de conservação, distribuídas nos ambientes marinho, costeiro e terrestre. Nesse esforço para consolidar o desenvolvimento sustentável do país, estamos operacionalizando os mecanismos previstos no novo Código Florestal. Um exemplo de sucesso é o Cadastro Ambiental Rural. Nós concluímos e demos o grande passo no povoamento desse cadastro e acabamos de cadastrar 5,1 milhões de propriedades rurais em todo o território nacional. E desse cadastramento, somente nas propriedades privadas, foram destinados mais de 100 milhões de hectares destinados à proteção das florestas dentro das propriedades privadas. Por fim, menciono a relevância da cooperação internacional para a proteção das florestas. A mobilização de recursos financeiros por pagamentos por resultados é fundamental. Negociamos a Convenção Quadro de Mudanças do Clima, as regras pelos quais os recursos seriam transferidos a países que comprovem seu engajamento na agenda e a redução efetiva das emissões provenientes do desmatamento e da degradação florestal, bem como a conservação e aumento de estoques e manejo sustentável de florestas, o conhecido como REDD+. Para avançar globalmente, na agenda ainda será necessário ampliar a escala de recursos sendo transferidos para pagamentos por resultados vinculados à REDD+. A previsibilidade dos fluxos financeiros para apoiar tais iniciativas é fundamental para construir confiança sobre a sustentabilidade das ações de combate ao desmatamento e degradação florestal, assim como para ampliação da restauração e do reflorestamento. O Fundo Amazônia completou 10 anos, muito jovem, uma criança, mas já dá grandes lições e grandes resultados, e ontem tivemos a oportunidade de comemorarmos em grande festa aqui na Noruega, consolidando-se como importante instrumento pioneiro para apoiar mecanismos de pagamento por resultados de REDD+. Lembro que, por meio do Fundo Amazônia, já apoiamos a instalação de instrumentos de monitoramento do desmatamento nos 8 países da Bacia Amazônica, dando uma contribuição extremamente relevante para a proteção do clima global ao preservar a maior floresta tropical do planeta, a Amazônia. Entretanto, esperamos ampliar cada vez mais as oportunidades de cooperação internacional, inclusive de natureza triangular, e Sul-Sul, contemplando os países em desenvolvimento que possuam florestas tropicais. Para o Brasil, a garantia de integridade ambiental deve ser compromisso de todos os países na definição das regras para implementação do Acordo de Paris. RED+, é um instrumento crucial para ampliar a ambição sobre a ação e apoio no combate à mudança do clima. Muito obrigado.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage the Vice Mayor for Environment and Transport, Lan Marie Nguyen Berg.
Ministers, Excellencies, and friends of the forests, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to Oslo, a city with high climate ambitions, and actually also a very forest-rich capital. As you arrived into Oslo, you might not have noticed or thought about it, but Oslo is actually 2/3 forest and 1/3 urban. The geographic center of the municipality is, in fact, a lake deep into the forest. It sounds a bit like a fairy tale, but Oslo is surrounded by green forest. If you jump on one of our metro lines, you can be sure that this end stop will bring you to the forest edge. The forest bordering Oslo serves as our water tower and protects us from flash floods during the heavy rains. It is managed sustainably, allowing for job creation and economic growth. And we are taking care of our forests for future generations. Our forests are cherished destinations for leisure, for relaxation and for contemplation for our citizens and visitors. And it is a treasure chest for biologists, as Oslo is the municipality with the highest number of recorded species in Norway. So we think that we have something in common, citizens of Oslo and citizens of rainforest nations. I am pleased that the Norwegian government is taking a lead role internationally to assist rainforest nations in their efforts to protect their forests. Because success in stopping deforestation and reducing forest degradation is crucial to achieve the Paris targets. It is an under-focused area, but I hope that that will change soon. And I also want to underscore the contribution of cities that we can make and are making in fighting climate change in the world today. Cities account for around 70% of the world's emissions, when emissions from the energy, the food, and the fiber consumed in the cities are taken into account. Hence, reducing the climate footprint of cities is a key part of the climate solution. Since we took position as the city government in October 2015, we have implemented what I think is the most ambitious climate targets of any capital city in the world. 12 years from now, in 2030, we shall deliver a 95% reduction from 1990 levels. Oslo will in 12 years practically be a zero-emitting city. And the city government strongly believe that emission reductions are not to be implemented somewhere else, by someone else, or at another time. We want to take responsibility right here and right now. Last time I spoke at this conference at the City Hall, 2 years ago, I presented our climate ambitions and plans. This year, I am thrilled to inform you that it works. In 2016, emissions went down 8% from the year before. Transport has been and still is our main challenge. but 2017 gave us further reason to believe that we are on the right track, as we saw a record high number of passengers in our public transport system. For the first time, a reduction in the number of cars passing through our city's toll ring since its establishment in 1990. And the highest share ever recorded of electric plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles as of new cars sold in Oslo. Actually, 50% of the new cars sold in Oslo were electric or plug-in. Our ambitions and results have also been recognized abroad. 1 year ago, Oslo was awarded the title European Green Capital of 2019 by the European Commission. This is a result of our ambitious green approach in upgrading our city, and we are happy and we hope to have many of you coming to visit us next year when we are the European Green Capital. And in March this year, Oslo was asked by the IPCC to present our climate budget as an innovative governance instrument on how cities can better manage climate action. The climate budget works in tandem with our fiscal budget. It sets an upper limit of annual emissions and identifies measures for climate action and who is responsible for the implementation. And just recently, C40, a global climate network of the world's largest and innovative cities, found Oslo to be among the first 5 cities in the world to be fully compliant with the Paris Agreement. And still, there are many voices that are critical to why Norway, let alone Oslo, should play an active role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The argument is that our share of the emissions is only a fraction of the world's emissions. I couldn't disagree more. As any group of 5 million people, like Norway, cause only a fraction of the global emissions. Every single city or person on the planet could use this same excuse for inaction. And we who are in this room today, we know that we do not have time for inaction. In closing, I want to recognize the fantastic work of rainforest nations, of NGOs, committed companies, and indigenous peoples who are taking action to preserve our planet through protecting rainforests. Let's not be tempted to use any excuse for inaction, but rather continue our forceful work with making our cities, forests, and nations a better place to live. I wish you a fruitful conference and a great stay in Oslo. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage the chair of the program committee in Oslo Tropical Forest Forum, Francis Seymour.
Welcome to the Oslo Tropical Forest Forum. I hope you agree that was a really wonderful way to get started with the music and the presentations and so many articulate remarks. As many of you know, this conference is actually the 4th in a series of conferences that's been hosted here. And I think it would be interesting to get a sense of the continuity that we have in the room from over the last decade. May I ask those of you for whom this is your first time to stand up? We have a lot of fresh blood in the room. I would like you to look around at the people still seated. They are your informants about how to make the best use of this conference. Please sit down. Now, I'd like to ask you to stand if you have at least once or twice attended these conferences, not those who have done all 4. So once or twice, please stand up. Okay, so my understanding, the tradition here in Norway is if you've been invited back, you say takk for sist, thanks for the last time. So all together now, takk for sist. Thanks, very good, you can sit down. All right, now those of you who, like me, have been here for the duration, all 4 times, please stand up. Ah, okay, so we have some continuity from the whole thing. I think we need to be managing our carbon footprints a little better, flying back and forth. But in fact, this year is a very special conference. As has been mentioned, it is a 10th anniversary for a lot of important things. The entrance of forests into the climate negotiations, the initiation of the Norwegian Climate and Forest Initiative, the launch of the Amazon Fund, and it's a really good opportunity to celebrate all of the many real achievements that have taken place, as well as sort of take stock of where we are and see, the road ahead. But it's also important that we pause and reflect for what we have not achieved. As you heard earlier from the minister, the 2017 tree cover loss numbers, which were released today by my colleagues at Global Forest Watch, are not encouraging. 2017 was only slightly better than 2016, and that was a record bad year. So you have to pause for a minute and think, is it that we're doing something wrong? I think we need to be open to that possibility in our discussions over the next 2 days, but I tend to agree with the Prime Minister that actually we know what it takes, and we're just not doing enough of it, and we don't have enough help in doing it. It's kind of like we're this tiny little fire brigade, and we're trying to put out a raging fire in a tall building with a bucket of water and a teaspoon. And what we really need is lots of fire brigades and lots of engines and taller ladders and more pressure in the fire hose, and to keep those other guys from pouring more gasoline on the fire. But unfortunately, it seems to me that a lot of constituencies, organizations, people who should be helping us, they seem to be asleep to the urgency and importance of this agenda and the fact that we can do something about it. People in climate world, in development world, consumers, some corporations. And we need to find a way to wake them up to the problem and mobilize them to help us solve it. Now, those of you who've participated in previous conferences know that I have shared with you stories about my family. My mother, the church organist, who is a secret basketball fanatic, and the lesson learned was that you have to keep the faith in your team even when you're losing. My father, the Baptist minister, who's a fanatic about putting together jigsaw puzzles and the lessons we can learn about the need to fit all the different pieces together. This year, my poor brother Rob is the one on the line. So Rob is an anesthesiologist, and the family joke is that my father, the Baptist preacher, and my brother, the anesthesiologist, are in the same business of putting people to sleep. But people tend to think about anesthesiologists as only putting people to sleep. But in fact, when you think about it, it's actually even more important that they know how to wake you up. And so in light of these 2017 numbers and the need to really sound the wake-up call, I had a conversation with my brother about what insights we might get from anesthesiology about waking people up. And he gave me 3 pointers. So, number 1 rule in anesthesiology, timing is critical. You have to deliver the right combination of medicines at exactly the right time, coordinated with what else is going on in the operating theater and to the patient's vital signs. So I think that's the same as for us. We need to be developing the right messages at the right time about deforestation and climate change, and coordinate those messages with what else is going on in our political environment, and package those messages in ways that can be accepted by our key allies in this fight. I think this meeting is one of the key moments for the kind of wake-up call we need, but I also think we need to look ahead to moments when other constituencies gather, like the Global Climate Action Summit in California in September, or the World Bank IMF meetings in Bali in October, where people who are talking about climate development can maybe receive our messages about the importance of forests. Second tip from the anesthesiologist is the need to control local pain. As the patient regains consciousness, he or she may have pain at the place of the surgery, and that pain needs to be treated separately from the overall awakening. And I feel like in the same way, we know that the transition to a deforestation-free world, even though on balance it's good for the planet, it's good for people, will be painful for some localized people in communities. Smallholders who may have to change the way they do business. And so we need to be conscious of that economic pain and help smooth the transition, especially for those who are least able to bear it. Third principle from anesthesiology: consciousness with paralysis is the worst possible outcome. This is how my brother explained it to me. Anesthesiologists try to avoid at all costs having the patient wake up before the muscle relaxants wear off, because it's terrifying to wake up but not be able to move. And I think that's the same for us. It doesn't help to raise the alarm about forests are disappearing if we don't give people the tools that gives them confidence that there is a solution and give them the ability to act. So that's the lesson from anesthesiology. Which brings me to our program. We have an amazing lineup of high-level plenaries for the rest of this morning and for Thursday afternoon. But we also have 16, count them, 16 parallel sessions that will be running all this afternoon and all tomorrow morning. All but one strand of those parallel sessions will be live streamed and open to the press, so be vigilant in your comments. And I'll be making some more announcements about other opportunities and schedules for lunches and dinner before we break for lunch later this morning. But I did want to say a word about the app. If you haven't downloaded the app yet, you need to do that. If you need help, as I do, as an over 50-something person, there is a help desk who can help you do that. We will be taking questions through the app, and we also will be doing some voting exercises through the app. So before we break for the coffee break, I'll give you some more instructions about that, but it's not too late to start using your smartphone or an iPad that you can borrow to follow through the program, make your choices wisely, and contribute to it by posing questions. And I believe that function is already live, so you can start putting questions to speakers and panelists in future sessions right now. Without taking any more time for my own remarks, I think it's time to move to other members of the anesthesiology team. It's going to help wake us up. And I'm very pleased to introduce as our first speaker, Carlos Nobre. Carlos is one of Brazil's, or the leading scientists from Brazil in the field of climate science and earth system science. He has held so many leadership roles in science organizations and science policy processes, I couldn't possibly list them, but he's held leadership posts, for example, in the National Institutes for Climate Change Research and National Institute for Space Research. He's currently a senior fellow with WRI Brazil, and recently authored a very compelling piece in Science Advances on the danger of tipping points in the Amazon. So he's going to give us an update on the science linking forests to climate change. Carlos.
Good morning to all. It's a great privilege for me participating in this very important meeting. I hope this meeting will bring important solutions and to be a landmark historical meeting for finding new innovative ways for the tropical forests of the planet. Also, I want to take this opportunity to thank the government and the people of Norway for making available funds, for making also to raise the issue to global levels that help, irrespective of the total value, came at a very critical moment for all tropical countries, particularly for Brazil. Because my experiences in the Amazon, I will mostly talk about the Amazon, but I think it's applicable to many forests in the planet. It may look far-fetched today, but not long ago, the tropical forests were portrayed as green hell in literature, in movies, and that really was used by non-democratic governments in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Amazonian countries to push a development that you had to get rid of the green hell. You have to get rid of the forests. Of course, that's quite different from the vision of the people there who live in the forest, from the forest, for the forest. That's green paradise. So scientists have been very concerned about that. International scientific community got very interested in finding out the role of tropical forests. So there has been, in the last 30 years, a very large number of studies. And if I can sum them up with one sentence, I think the science would say tropical forests are not green paradise. They are much more than that. They are the green goddesses of climate and ecological stability. I think this is very clear today in science that, and of course, we can say the role of rainfall in driving climate stability, tropical circulations, fueling a very powerful hydrology. The Amazon is a powerful system, hydrological system. You see the greenness index. Tropical forests are green all year round, so they don't, although there is a dry season, but they continue to function. Photosynthesis continues at maximum rate. And of course, that is very essential for hosting biological evolution and the metric of biological evolution, species diversity, highest in the planet, and also associate with that biodiversity, ethnic and linguistic diversity. So tropical forests are very important in all those respects. And of course, this is well known for these communities for a while, and of course, the Forum, Red Plus, all these efforts have contributed to a much better understanding the role of the tropical forests, global forests, for fighting climate change. This number has been said many times, 30% of all the emissions are taken back to the forests in the planet. If not for that service, we would have exceeded 1.5 degrees without the oceans, 2 degrees warming. So it's essential. And of course, being from Brazil, I want to highlight the Amazon forest is, it's a decadal average here, 2 billion tons of CO2 being removed from the atmosphere every year. So but there are other issues, non-carbon, that I want to highlight very briefly. It's not only the carbon benefits. We can think of also non-carbon benefits that forests provide. Very briefly, I want to illustrate. Deeper roots in the forest, extracting water very deep, extracting water year-round, keeping evapotranspiration very high in the dry season compared to replacement pastures. Rougher surface, which makes the transition, the transport of moisture, water vapor, and heat, keeping forests cooler. And when you put together all these elements and with the current knowledge, clearly we know tropical forests maintain higher rainfall rates, maintain higher evapotranspiration rates year-round, productivity, photosynthesis. Large-scale pastures are 1 to 2.5 degrees warmer, and they may have 10 to 20% less rainfall. You may think this is not a lot, but of course, this is a lot. It's quite a different climate in the tropics if you remove forests completely. If you've been to the Amazon or to a tropical forest, you can almost see the transpiration of the forest there. And in particular, forests produce a certain amount of the rain. So you may almost see that as a biological climate joint evolution. Forests help to produce 20% of the rain. So they help to maintain the existence of forests, producing more rain. And I've been involved in a number of studies that was really to ask what would happen to the Amazon if we deforest. And we found the results that we may have two stable solutions, very different solutions. One is the Amazon as we know it, forests covering 6 million square kilometers all across the basin. But also we could have a second stable state, forest, vegetation, and climate, which is forests covering all of the western Amazon, near the Andes, western Brazil, because the rainfall there will always be kept high for other reasons. But over eastern, southeastern Amazon, you might have a different system. You might have a savanna, a tropical savanna. And savannas are much more tolerant to fire. And if you have more vegetation fire or more droughts, that savanna will be there irreversibly. Even if climate change is checked, even if deforestation is reduced to zero, if that system changes, tips to this other equilibrium, we are going to have savannas there with much less biodiversity, with much less carbon, because savannas are adapted to this new climate with less rainfall, longer dry season. So what takes to move from one of these equilibrium to the next? We've been studying that, and of course the drivers, human drivers of change, a very worrying one, global warming and the hydrological changes associated with global warming. Deforestation, we have 18% of the Amazon, over 1 million square kilometers already deforested. We have seen a very troublesome element, which is forest fires. Even during the years in which Brazil successfully reduced deforestation, forest fires did not fall at the same proportion. Very troublesome. More extreme droughts, more heat, more forest fires, and still fire being used in tropical agriculture. Also, global warming will bring more lightning as a cause of natural fires. And so all those drivers are taking us to some concern. One of them is that we are seeing in the short period of 2005-2016, 6 extremes, floods and droughts. We had never seen that. Paleo records would not show anything like that in 500 years. What's going on? We don't know. We don't know exactly whether this is global warming. And also, the length of the dry season in southern Amazon is increasing. So those are very troubling scientific observations that are leading us to become very concerned. And that's why Professor Thomas Lovejoy and I made this statement that we should not exceed 20 to 25% of total deforested area. We are 18. We are very close to the limit. Why? Because global warming is still operating, because deforestation is still going on, although we want to bring it to zero, and forest fires are becoming more serious. So basically, urgent action is needed to stop completely Amazon deforestation. Let me move down now only to my final statements here. We've been talking a lot for decades about this thing. Nobody here in this audience, and not even in Brazil, wants the Amazon to become a global farm or a global cattle ranch. But really, are we moving? Can we succeed? The tree loss data are showing that we are not really succeeding as we expected. So perhaps we have to start thinking in alternative ways. We have really to think out of the box. We have to not only keep convincing the agribusiness to become more sustainable, enforcing legislation, working hard to make our countries more democratic. But also we have to think in new ways, but perhaps not new ways for the people living in the Amazon, in the tropical forests of the planet for millennia, which is to live out of the biodiversity. So the Amazon has very high biodiversity, as our Minister of Environment stressed, but we have to bring the modern tools of technology and science to explore, to harness the biological and biomimetic assets of the Amazon, combined with traditional knowledge. This is a very important element, combining traditional knowledge. So we really have to think of an alternative way, a third way of development, which we haven't been discussing a lot. Innovation, science, technology, traditional knowledge, tapping into the biodiversity. We have to develop a standing forest bioeconomy, a biodiversity-driven economy. We are not talking or thinking much or bringing to bear the best knowledge, traditional and non-traditional. So this is really a very important element to keep forests forever, as we know. This is essential for planetary health. But also, not less important, it's essential for keeping the people of the forest happy. And this perhaps is even more important. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you will agree that was an awesome tour through the science, as well as not waking us up, but giving us a way forward. So something else that's happened over the last 10 years is an increasing appreciation among us of the role of finance as both part of the problem and part of the solution. So I'm really delighted that our next speaker is Corinna Smith-Iheanacho, who is the Chief Corporate Governance Officer of Norway's Sovereign Wealth Fund, which, as you may know, is the biggest one in the world. Before coming to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, she had a career as a lawyer with the Statoil, the national oil company, where she served as the Vice President for Legal Affairs and Chief Corporate Compliance Officer. And she's going to give us a talk on her take on the forest agenda from the perspective of a long-term global investor. Corinna.
Thank you, Francis, and good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and share the investor perspective. But first, my personal perspective. This picture is taken where I grew up, and it's actually only 30 minutes drive from here. My favorite forest, Nordmarka, it's not exactly tropical, but it's still magical. Forests are essential. They clean the air we breathe, help stabilize the climate, and protect biodiversity. More than 1 billion people depend on forests for their livelihoods. The forest is also a place to roam, to reflect, and to recuperate. Deforestation affects people's livelihood, quality of life, biodiversity, and climate change. But I sometimes hear that deforestation is not a material concern for institutional investors, as it only affects a small number of companies. I disagree. Deforestation is material, not least from a climate change perspective, also to us investors. My mission here today is to explain why we as an investor care about deforestation, what we want from the companies we have invested in, and what we as an investor can do. Our fund is a product of Norway's efforts to transfer natural resource wealth into financial assets, The fund is now worth more than $1 trillion. We invest globally in listed companies. We own approximately 1.4% of all listed companies in the world. The fund is a long-term investor, and we have a very clear mission. It is to safeguard and build financial wealth for future generations. Being large, global, and long-term are the key characteristics that define us. We sometimes say that we own a small part of the world's economic activity for eternity, and this means that our long-term return and prosperity depends on sustainable development. This brings opportunities and responsibilities as an owner. We have thought deeply about a set of principles that frame our activities. We work to reduce the environmental, social, and governance risks of the companies we have invested in and seek to promote long-term value creation. An important and early realization for us was that climate change may impact our investments. We have focused on climate change issues in the management of the fund for well over 10 years. If the companies we invest in plan for the climate transition and manage these risks, we and the planet will benefit as a result. And deforestation has a direct impact on climate change. Forests act as a carbon sink by absorbing carbon dioxide. Tropical and primary forests do this particularly well and store the carbon for a very long time. Deforestation alone is estimated to contribute to approximately 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And in some countries, this figure is much higher. Deforestation can also directly impact our investee companies. We have investment in companies that depend on forest and agriculture-related products. According to CDP, 80% of deforestation is attributable to land use change, driven mainly by 4 commodities: cattle products, palm oil, timber, and soy. We have also seen how particular business models, such as palm oil plantations and the destruction of tropical forests to create such plantations, can be subject to consumer, civil society, regulatory, and investor pressure. We want our companies to succeed. We work with them to support the transition towards a more sustainable business model. We have set our expectations to companies on climate change. These cover 5 main themes: the role of the board, how companies invest, how they assess risk, how they plan for different climate scenarios, for example, using 2-degree scenarios, and how they report on climate issues. But let me explain more concretely what we expect from companies exposed to deforestation risk. The outcome we want in the end is, of course, business practices that are sustainable and help safeguard forests for future generations. To get there, we believe boards must account for the business implications for forests. We want forests with either a direct or indirect impact. We want companies with either direct or indirect impact on tropical forests to have a clear strategy for reducing deforestation. For example, we encourage palm oil companies and finance providers to have a no deforestation, no peat, no exploitation policy. We want them to have robust systems in place to ensure its execution and transparency on its implementation. Companies should also monitor supply chain risk. We encourage them to adopt industry standards in their sustainable management of forests. For example, for companies involved in the production of trade of palm oil, we look at a round table on sustainable palm oil certification status or plans for future certification. We know that deforestation has financial implications. What is more difficult to know is what those numbers look like. We want better reporting from our companies. Improved material disclosure on forest data is needed to identify how deforestation risk may affect companies' financial performance. We like to say that we need to move from words to numbers. We need both financial and non-financial information. This will help identify whether companies are incorporating deforestation and climate implications in their strategic planning, risk management, and reporting. What gets measured gets managed. There are various initiatives and tools which aim to provide further transparency on forest-related data. Examples are SCRIP, Trace, Spot, CDP Forest Program, and Global Forest Watch. These tools are valuable to us as investors as they look at deforestation from different angles. Some promote the traceability of supply chain for commodities and products. Others assess companies' policies on deforestation. But high quality and comparable data is limited. Only 23% of the companies approached by CDP responded to the request for forest data. This lack of quality data availability should not prevent us from taking actions. In many ways, it is a call for action. So what do we do? Exercising ownership is one of the most effective tools we have at our disposal. That includes both shareholder voting and company dialogue. We leverage the fund size and investment horizon to promote sustainable business practices. Here are some examples. In 2017, we initiated a dialogue with companies on 2 topics related to deforestation. One was with commodity traders and meatpacking companies in Brazil on improving standards in their supply chain beyond the Brazilian Amazon. The other was with Indonesian and Malaysian banks on their policies governing palm oil financing. In 2017, we also organized roundtable with deforestation experts, companies, and investors. The objective was to better understand which practical steps companies can take to reduce forestation in the supply chain. We believe in keeping conversations practical. We discuss real experiences and case studies and highlight good practices. We also use our voting rights. Recently, we supported a shareholder resolution requesting a food retailer to report on companies' policies to reduce deforestation in the supply chain. But sometimes ownership is not appropriate or sufficient. We can then divest or exclude companies from our portfolio. Over the years, we have divested from 58 companies due to deforestation. We have also conducted 4 ethical exclusions of companies based on deforestation. These exclusions have been based on recommendations from the independent Norwegian Council on Ethics. We know that the tools at our disposal will not solve the deforestation problem on their own. Yet, we believe we have an inherent interest in and are well positioned to being a part of the solution. But we must work together. We as investors must work together with businesses, governments, NGOs, other financial institutions, and civil society. That is when we see real results. We invite all of you here for further dialogue. Sometimes it is hard to see the wood for the trees. I do not believe this is the case for how we look at deforestation. We think of deforestation as a climate change issue. This makes it material for us. It means we will continue to address deforestation risks and promote a more sustainable use of forests. Tropical forests are still alarmingly being cut down, even if deforestation rates may have peaked in many places. I hope the time is not that far away when global forests will return to growth. Thank you very much.
So, one sign that you're getting older is when you start discovering that your new professional colleagues are the sons and daughters of your old professional colleagues. And our next speaker, it turns out, is the daughter of a man that I worked with when I was working at the Ford Foundation in Indonesia 30 years ago. Ruka Sombolinggi, daughter of the Pak Sombolinggi I worked with all those years ago, belongs to the Toraja tribe of Sulawesi in Indonesia. And she's currently the Secretary General of AMAN, which is the Indigenous Peoples Federation of Indonesia. And it's an elected position from the membership. And I learned last night that in order to be with us here today, Ruka is missing the first few days of a 2-week-long ritual in her community, which is to celebrate a housewarming that only happens once every 60 years. So thank you, Ruka, for being here. We look forward to your talk.
Yep. Good morning. Manasu Moraka. That's in my language. Our traditions is sharing. We eat together. So our greetings is Manasu Moraka, which means when you come to somebody else's house, we say, "Are the food ready? Have you cooked?" And then we will say, the people in the women or men in the house will say, "Manasumo, talendu opa, let's come and eat." So that's basically what I'm going to present here today, and hopefully I will. So my name is Ruka Sombolinggi, and that's true. I saw one of the pictures, one of the video of people dancing last night. My mom is sending, I said, "This is what we've been missing." And I said, "Don't worry, I'm going home. That's why I need to excuse myself. Please excuse me, because I will have to fly back home right after this, the lunch today, because I really need to attend at least one part of that ceremony." Because I asked my mom, I say, "If I don't come, what will happen?" And say, "Oh, it's really up to you, baby. But the problem is, it's going to be the next 60 years. I said, "When I live that long, what will happen? I'm probably going like this." So that's why, please excuse me, I'll go home after this. And please, I'm here extending the regards and greeting of indigenous peoples from Indonesia. The AMAN, according to our quick count census, our members are 18 million individuals, indigenous peoples across Indonesia, and there are from within 2,366 indigenous communities. They are taken care by 21 regional chapters. They are also taken care by 117 local chapters. We have wing organizations because we realize the importance of indigenous youth and women. We created specially wing organizations for them. And we also, since we are facing a lot of legal cases of our leaders, our activists are being criminalized, we also form a lawyer association to take care of those cases. We also have economic enterprises. We have autonomy bodies they are working on different fields. We come here, all the leaders of the world from tropical forest. Indigenous peoples are the best guardian of the forest, are the best guardian of the earth. looking at you now. Because some people, I saw Frances like smiling, some like frowning, some like, but what it means, because what we have here is what we believe is what we can see in numbers. Our brain has made so simple that we only believe in numbers. So let me show you numbers. This is the global map of the carbon storage within indigenous and local communities across the globe. This is just rough estimates conducted by our friends at the RRI with Woodhull's centers. And it actually shows that 24% at least carbon storage above the ground today is within indigenous territories. And this is, most of these places are actually not recognized or protected. So that's the minimum that we have without protections. So we can imagine how much we will get if we protect them. And then again, numbers. As Prime Minister said in her remarks today, this morning, said that we come here how to stop and reverse deforestation. I would like to add and say, and maintain economic growth. When I went back, I was inspired of one of my visits to California, of one of our indigenous brothers and sisters there, the Yurok community people. They managed to negotiate a lot of things. They managed to fight for their rights. They used economic argument. So when I went back to Indonesia, I said, we need to do the same thing, because that really will show the contributions of indigenous peoples at the very local level. So we are lucky because we have leading economists from leading universities, from University of Indonesia, Bogor Agriculture Institute, from Pajajaran University, and I'm very proud to introduce that one, the leader of the study is here, Pak Mubarik. Where is Pak Mubarik? Oh, here. They went to 6 indigenous community, and one I'm going to present here is just one case. Just one case. The case is, so the results from conclusions is, when you recognize indigenous people's rights, they actually gain more benefit. Economic activities will really provide income that is greater than regional annual income. Then the indirect or direct use of environmental services is really big. The sample here from Malam Karta, where is Pak Bupati dan Pak Gubernur? Pak, ini dari kampung kita ya, Sorong, from West Papua. This community has been recognized by local legislation. And this is just small community. This is just about 15,000 hectares. About 300 communities, 300 families. The annual revenue is $2,938 a year. If you compare, it is much higher than the regional per capita per year, which is 2,413. There's a gap, and we exceeded the regional economy. If we go back into detail, if we look into detail, you can see that from the natural resources that were Professor said from biodiversity services, it's worth $667,000 US a year. And for environmental services that included carbon stock, around $3,000 US a year, they actually can gain 10.9 million US a year. And this actually shows that when we recognize indigenous peoples, when we protect indigenous peoples, this huge amount of money is contributed by indigenous peoples. And by protecting the forest, by protecting indigenous people's rights, we are actually ensuring economic growth. So this is what the offers for indigenous peoples here, because we are still facing so many challenges. The challenges, it's still the same story. Criminalizations, people are being murdered, people are being affected. The cases from the recent study by UN Special Rapporteur in protected areas actually shows that in 2000, only for the protected areas, conservations, in 27 countries, there's still massive, ongoing criminalizations and evictions of indigenous peoples in the name of conservation. This give out license for oil palm company in this forest of these people. So I'm actually calling now that how do we stop and reverse deforestations and maintain economic growth? I couldn't believe yesterday when I was having, I had a chat with one of the head of district from West Papua. They stopped giving out license, they keep the forest intact. But even to build micro-hydro power for electricity, then they even don't get money. And where is the money when we talk about perform? They have performed. Indigenous peoples, local government, we perform. And where's the money when you talk about payment? We are still talking so much at the very big level while we fail to take notice or to appreciate or to pay attention on what is really going on at a very local level. Going local, going into site, this is what actually how we can expedite the combating deforestation in the future. There are things, good things at local level, for example, like in Tambrau, that we need to appreciate. Because if we don't do it soon, they will give up. They will say, well, I keep it intact, I don't get anything. Well, if I get rid of this, probably I will get something. What is this? Because we are here, we need to help each other. We need to recognize the rights of indigenous peoples, because the wealth of indigenous peoples will maintain our economic growth, and the contributions in maintaining the carbon is the one that we share with the other citizens of the world. Because we are here, for me, I don't see what's so-called donor and recipient relations. Why? Because we are all donor. We are all recipients. We are living on the principle of reciprocity. We share. What I don't have, you give me, and what I have, I give you. So we are here, we act quick. We go down the very local level. We do it as soon as possible. We save our own life. We save our family. We save our earth. We save our society. We save the Mother Earth and the civilizations. I would say thank you very much, and I hope we have you have fruitful conversations in the next 2 days. Thank you.
Well, I hope you agree we've had some very stimulating presentations and helping to wake us up and give us ammunition to wake other people up. But I also understand that one of the great values of these conferences is the networking that takes place during coffee breaks. So we will break for coffee. I have a couple of logistical announcements first. One, I've been asked to suggest that for those of you who've been using the hotel Wi-Fi, that you might want to switch to the OTFF Wi-Fi, password OTFF 2018, better, more secure, just a suggestion. And I also encourage you to become familiar with your app. Make sure that it's downloaded. If you need help, go to the help desk, because starting with the next session, you're going to need to use it. If we have time, we're going to start the next session with a couple of voting questions, and you'll need to be in your app to vote. It'll be pretty self-explanatory. But also, if you want to send questions to the moderator of the next panel discussion, you will need to use the app. And to do that, you just, you scroll down to the right session in the program, click on that, then click on the right arrow, and there will be a little box that opens up, send in questions, and you click on that and type in the question that you want to pose, and that'll be received by the moderator. So please be familiar with your app so that when we come back together, we'll be ready to use it to have some interactive activity. By my watch, we're only about 9 minutes behind, which isn't too bad considering how many speakers we have. I'm going to propose that we give you 5 minutes past the 11 o'clock hour, which is when we're supposed to reconvene. So let's all be back in here at 11:05 and be ready to vote on some of our opinions on things, okay? Thank you very much.